Good morning and welcome to another session of GM Tips. This is GM Rick. I hope everybody's doing great this morning. Sorry, I'm going to move out the way. My little Easter thing up there from my fiance, it's kind of cool. She got me one of these little steampunkish clocks, which I love. So there's some new hardware up there. I hope everybody's doing good. I hope the video's coming in fine for everyone. So this morning, the topic we're going to discuss is a very important topic, I think. It's the 5 GM don'ts, and I've got a 6th optional don't on there as well. And, you know, there's always, I give you guys the do's. Do this, do that, try to do this, try to do that. I truly believe there are at least 5 don'ts as a DM and a GM. And so I really want to get into those and really want to lay these out to you because I think these are the things that will become the real sticking points in games. They'll become the things that will make you the kind of DM or GM that most players are not going to want to spend time with and be with. And so as we discuss these, I hope it helps you guys to really get a flavor for the things that just leave out of the sessions and don't do. Number 1, and I think is the most important don't of all the don'ts. Don't try to control everything as the GM. Don't. Don't try to control the story outcome. You cannot control how the players are going to react to the plot itself, or the as I call it, the call to action. We go through these things, and it's funny. I've got this little book that I use for my sessions that I'm GMing, and it has the things that we talked about. And that is goal, obstacle, character, and attempt. What can you control? The goal and the obstacle. You can't control the character and attempt, which is the story outcome. So just keep that in mind. If your players take your story off some direction or your campaign off some direction, let them have some rope to run with. I'm just telling you, because if you don't, you're going to really have issues. Don't try to control the player's actions. Remember, that's what we said. It's their attempt to do what they're going to do in a session. You can't control if the rogue wants to go off the rails and go rob something in the town. However, you can introduce some consequences. I wouldn't make them, showstoppers, but it could light a fire to say, hey, maybe I should be a little more discreet next time when I'm doing that attempt, because that could cost us some real problems in the future. You're not there to totally derail the fun of the rogue. The rogue is the rogue. Same way with your murder hobos, as you call them, or the people that are just trying to cause chaos in a town. You can't and don't want to necessarily kill them off. I know that the urge is there as a GM, and it's been discussed many times in many groups. Don't do it. Just put some deterrents in there that make them kind of think twice before doing it again. You can't control that and put consequences. Like I say, at all actions there are consequences, good and bad. And so bad consequences come when you do bad things sometimes, and it's just the way it is. You cannot control the plot once it's out there. The plot is there. You can put little side things that can move things back onto the rails if you choose. But I wouldn't go too heavy here with that. Things will go back as they go back. And don't try to control the session banter. People banter. That's why they get together. They want to talk. They want to shoot the breeze. Now, 90% of your session shouldn't be shooting the breeze. But give them some moments that they can spend and laugh and joke about things and have a little side banter about life and what's going on. You guys are friends, hopefully, getting together, and that's what a group should become over time, as a group of friends, and not just a group of players and a GM. The long term will be the friendship. It really will. And it'll keep you from, as a GM, being critical of the players, and that's something you've got to really avoid with that, so that goes under controlling everything. Please do not call out the problem players. This is number 2, during the session. If you call them out during the session, you are going to make them feel slighted. And I'm telling you right now, you don't love to be called out in a session when you're a player, don't call them out. If you have to pull them aside later and talk with them a little bit and just reason in a reasonable way, I know there's always going to be that player that's going to drive you wonky, even if they're a friend of yours and they're good friends of yours. They are going to do something that just sits on your last nerve, and it's going to cause you to want to call them out and really spotlight them. Don't do that. Try to enlist that player to help you in your campaign. Try to find ways to encourage them. Try to find ways to encourage a positive outcome. Like, for instance, I have a player of mine that loves to do his builds in a certain way, and he brought up that he wanted to change some of his feats because he was seeing how the story was laying out, and his feats just weren't quite lining up. It's becoming a little bit more skill-based than it is attack-based. So he asked me, Rick, can I change some skills or some feats? Can I change them around? And so I made a rule. Every 3 levels that he goes up, he can retrain 1 feat if he chooses to. If it's not going his way, he can take the time and retrain himself. I don't have a problem with that. Every 3 levels will give you enough time to retrain a feat. It seems realistic. Now, some of you as GMs would say, Rick, don't do that. That's way out. That's a table rule that I set out. Why? Because this allows him to get a little bit of what he wants, but yet limits the, let's just change every feat every time. You got to come up with some creative ways to work with your players. And don't just call them out. And don't just make them problem children. They're not that. Each individual is very different in how they view life and how they view what they want to get out of a game. So you as a GM have to work with them on that. Third, don't argue game rules and table rules. Sorry, that's the GM in the background having fun with her little minis, herself, her little friends. You can't control the game rules, the table rules, or the character rules by arguing with your player. Look, if a player points out that you're doing something wrong, have the integrity to take a look at it later. Maybe you say, hey, you know what? Let's table this till after the session. If I'm wrong, then we can go back and the next time we'll adjust things to make up for it. And you got to look at that. It's not a question of being right or wrong. A player probably is just trying to help you as a GM to make sure you understand the rules. There were some understandings that I had with one of my players that we were kind of conflicting a little bit on the rule. So what I did is I went out to the Paizo site. Now you can pick whatever game site. Hopefully they have some message boards and communities out there for whatever game system. And you can do a lookup search for something. I did that. Like, for instance, he was asking, can I use spiritual weapon multiple times in combat and have multiple spiritual weapons flying around? I looked it up. There is nothing that says. In fact, it says there's no limitations to that. Every round they can cast a spiritual weapon. However, only twice during that round can 2 of those weapons attack because you get 2 movement actions. That's the things you got to look up as a GM in whatever rule system. So if they want to do something unique, don't argue it at the table. Say, you know what, let's table this. This combat, let's just keep to the standard of what we know. And then I'll go look it up. And if it's the case, then what we'll do from now on going forward is I'll make sure that we do it the way we find it out to be. That's a reasonable compromise. And I think it's reasonable for the player to wait for you till the next session. It's not going to destroy anything. Yeah, it'll take a little bit out of their fun for that session, but it's a reasonable compromise that keeps an argument. I'll give you a perfect example. I argued with a player one time on how he set up his build and his rules. And he and I literally divided the table. Some of them just shut up and said nothing. Some backed me because they were angry at how he was doing things and getting a little bit, short with him. And then there was his position. It should have never come to that. And it was a mistake I made as a GM, and I'm here to stand and say I screwed up. And I should not have handled it that way. And I let my temper and my just shortness with how he was trying to push his way get me upset. You can't do that as a GM. You can't. And I know it's hard, especially if you're a new GM. You want to feel in control. You do not want to feel like your players are manhandling how you GM. But you as a GM, my fellow GMs, please have the decorum to say, you know what, That's a good question. I don't know the answer. And I don't want to take an hour and a half out of our session. If you're going to a break, say, hey, let's look up it during the break. Let's just cut a break here and I'll take a look at it. If you don't have time for a break, say, hey, you know what? Let's table this one and I'll research it with you. And I'll send you some information while we're out of session. And we'll be ready for the next session with it. You can still keep playing on. But let them know that you aren't going to take seriously what they're saying. And that you don't doubt that they're trying to do the right thing. But you just want to make sure that you don't take away from the gameplay in doing it. Do not go for the TPK. You new GMs, total party kill is not your reason in life. You are not there to kill off the parties. I remember when I started DMing D&D back in the day when there was the blue box, and the whole goal was, okay, you are the DM. You're there to just fight the party with the baddies. No, you aren't. You're there to create a great story. You're there to create a compelling plot that draws the players in with obstacles that makes it difficult for them to achieve these different plot stories, or goals. Then it's up to them to write the story. And all you're doing is providing the side scenery, the people, the different locations, the fun. You're painting a picture with your players. You paint the outline, they're painting the fine details. And it's a masterpiece of everyone. You are not there to kill them off. Now, TPKs happen. Sometimes the party, despite better judgment, will wander into that dragon's lair at 4th level that you don't want them to wander into, and they're going to take on the mighty dragon. And it will happen. And death will come. And what you try to do, and I had a player, in fact, and I go back to this, because I think how you handle it as a GM really will set you apart with your players. He was dead for all purposes. His character was, boom, flatlined by this Yeti. Knocked him so far into next week with a critical, he was gone. And it was a Yeti, and it wasn't that far off of him. You know, it was about a 2-hit die difference. But the party was, as a whole, matched with him. I said, you know what? This is a guy who's a good guy. He had missed some sessions because he was ill. He didn't get the experience like the other guys did. And he really was trying to build a tremendously fun character. I had his God step in. It will be the only time his God will step in. But it is the one time, and it ties into his background story. And he has a drink with him at the bar. Caden Kayleen, if you haven't figured it out from Pathfinder. And he says to him, boyo, how you doing there? Are you having a good outing? And he goes, no, not really. He goes, I could see that, boyo. He says, well, I tell you what, your destiny isn't to stop here. I know you think it is, and to come to me, but it's not. I've got a lot more planned for you. Why don't you have a drink with me and we can discuss it? And down he drinks it. And it was a jolt that shot him back to life. Put him to 1 hit point. Right near the Yeti. Right in time for the priest, which had the next action in the round, to do the area effect mass heal. So up he goes to 13 hit points. He's feeling a little better. Not quite full. Not quite ready to get the Yeti. So he lays on the ground and plays possum a little bit, while the Yeti's going after another person. Heals himself up and becomes the guy that just does the critical hit to the leg of the Yeti, severing an artery and killing the Yeti. But let me tell you something there. That made that session memorable for him. He didn't go nutty with it. He didn't, with 1 hit point, jump up and come swinging. I said, you feel a little bit of the effects of the drink. You're feeling a little woozy. You're not quite right. And when you go into combat, you're going to be at these negatives because you had a drink with Caden Kayleen. And so you can do some creative things like that. Whether you're in a sci-fi campaign and some outer force comes in, whether you're in an atheistic campaign and some weird random event happens that pops them, don't pop them back to a full go, but get them back to where they aren't dead. Sometimes that is worth more and tells a more interesting story than just letting the player die. And so you're the GM. You can infuse whatever you choose. Don't let your players depend on that. And tell them, look, I'm not going to do that every turn for every player. It may happen somewhere in the course for you. But understand, it'll be different with every one of them. And so you kind of set the stage. But you're not there for the TPK. Don't be the source that removes the fun from gaming. And it kind of goes back like what I said. I could have been the source that was let the fun come out and let the Yetis be the death of the paladin. Yeah, it kind of makes a story. But it's not the epic story that they're looking for. The epic story is now, wow, my GM was not a pain in the rear end. I could have used another word, but many GMs around. A P with Rick. My GM really thought about that. And wow, that was a kind of a cool save. I didn't expect that from them. And don't be predictable. Be unique. Be something a little bit different. But don't be the one that stops the fun. Provide the enhancements for the fun. You are the fun. They should love to come into your sessions because there's always a twist and a turn they never expect. But don't take it out by trying to be too mechanical. And this goes into my 6th point, which is not a must, but I think some GMs are it, and they have to watch out. Don't be so much about the mechanics of play over story. Look, mechanics are important. Don't get me wrong. And some of you would argue this with me, and some of you are going to argue that mechanics have to be there. I agree. You have to have mechanics in a game to make a game somewhat realistic. But let's face it, we're playing fantasy games and sci-fi games. They're not realistic, okay? They never were intended to be. But don't go off the deep end on the other side either. Just realize that mechanics are important, but they're not the whole reason for gaming. If you GM to be about the mechanics and teaching people the mechanics, then you've got something wrong in the twist of what you're doing. Remember, you are the story designer and creator. I won't say the storyteller because your players tell the story. You just add parts a little bit as a narrator, but you're not the storyteller. Yes, you bring in the color enhancements, the background, the reasons why the world is the way it is, and all the other plots, but you are not the reason that things work in that world. And yes, you are the ultimate authority. And yes, you are the ultimate word. And yes, you are ultimately the GM. However, I find that GMs that really allow their players a little latitude, that allow them a little fun, that once in a while allow them to do something epic. Like, for instance, and I go back to this again from my play in this session, I really love Reign of Winter because I've learned a lot and changed a lot as a GM, even more. I looked at how to help my player to do his death from above move. He's got a death from above feat, but he was too far away from the monster, and he wanted to do it so badly, and he's trying to reason it. I said, let's look at it this way, and I helped him reason through it. What if you did your fly up maneuver, since your character has flight as an Aasimar, and you get to the height you want to be, and you hold your action for the next round, because it's going to take you 2 move actions to get to the thing you want and then get up in the air. It can't hit you anyways at that height. All it can do is look up, and then the next time you come down, you're going through it. He thought about it for a while, and he wanted to argue with me, I could tell. But then he said, you know what, that's a good idea. Because he saw I wasn't trying to limit him. I was trying to help him to figure out how to do his master move. And that really pumped him up, because it showed I wasn't the enemy. I wasn't the limiter. I wasn't about the mechanics. All I did is provide him a method to achieve what he was going to do. Yes, it wasn't as colorful as in that round. But then the next round, he went through them like butter and destroyed my monster. But he was so pumped. It was like, yes, I got to do my signature move. It seemed the impossible. And people go, why as a GM did you do that? Because it's about the story. It was about the experience. I created an experience for him that he will not easily forget. And now the next time he knows that, okay, maybe I can go talk to Rick about this a little bit because I want to make this happen. But how do I do it? And it's okay. You're there to help with that. It's part of helping them to write an epic story. So I hope this helps you guys with the don'ts. Please, please write these down and keep these and commit these to your mind. Because these don'ts are going to be the things that keep your game from being a boring, kind of predictable, kind of mechanical, not fun to play experience to the epic story that makes your players go, wow, that was really cool. They did a great job at GMing. And that's what you want to hear at the end of the day. Thanks, and I hope these GM tips help you today and this week, and have a great week. And Mini GM says that.